public comment around today? That one.
Well,
just come on, please come up, introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and you have your 3 minutes.
yeah, I'm Mark Flank. I emailed you all earlier today. I gave you have a handout for you this evening. I'm a resident of the Southbridge neighborhood, and I'm interested in Spur Trail. And actually, culture has some relationship to the mode shift that Littleton is trying to accomplish by paving the Spur Trail. Then there might be some relevance to culture and the mode shift. And if funding has some relevance to the applications and truthfulness of the representations made to CDOT and Arapahoe County, that also may have some, but I don't have any real prepared speech today. All I just want to say today is that, you know, as a taxpayer in Littleton and Arapahoe County and the state and a user of the trails, I think that the citizens of Littleton are entitled to know how we got to where we are today with this idea of fully paving 16-foot wide trail down Jackass Gulch. And as my statement to you all in the email today indicates, my looking at board documents almost raises more questions than it answers about how we got there. And I'm really hoping that whether or not the trail changes from where it is, we can get to an answer so that this is not ever repeated again, where something starts out in one way, ends up in another mode that is just not good for the citizens of Littleton and the users of the trail. And I thank you for giving me the time. I hope we can get to the bottom of those answers, and I look forward to listening to your discussion about culture and funding this evening. Thanks.
Thank you.
You guys have one?
Yes.
Next to me. I just want to make sure everybody got one.
Yes, I do. I've not had a chance to read it yet, but. All right, so thanks everyone for coming tonight. This is a special session, as we all know. We're trying to work through providing our delivery towards the RFP that will eventually be put out to find a consultant to update the TNT. So we're trying to walk through, flesh out the, I guess it was 5 high-level concepts we came up with that were to see in the new TMP. The 2 we're going to discuss tonight are funding and culture shift. So with no further ado, unless do you want me to address the email thing? Okay. Why don't we start with funding? I believe it was Derek and Michael. Maybe you guys could walk us through what you came up with as a subcommittee. Oops, sorry about that. And then if you have specific thoughts and ideas of what you want to hear from us, like what type of feedback, or if there are areas you want us to weigh in on, and then if not, we'll just weigh in anyways.
Well, awesome. You want to start, Michael?
I realize you have speaker notes. If you want me to not do it in present mode so you can see your notes, let me know.
Okay. Yeah. I think this is excellent.
Yeah, this is fine. So the approach that we took was kind of to first review what is in the current plan for funding. And that's what's summarized on this slide and the next slide. And then you'll see a slide where we identified maybe some opportunities for additional content that could be added. So hopefully that matches what you're expecting to see. The notes from our last meeting didn't have anything under funding like the other categories. So we kind of just, yeah, exactly. So as far as what's in there now, and maybe you guys have looked at this recently and you've seen this, but it starts with an overview of capital cost summary by, obviously by total, and then by project type. Auto, transit, and active transportation are the 3 primary categories. And then They're split as either local or regionally significant. Then it goes into a sales tax analysis, which is, the primary city source of funding. Revenue, I guess that's 2018 dollars, was only $33.8 million. It proposed varying levels of sales tax increase. And as we know, that passed recently, so that was successful. And then, I guess bonding or, pursuing debt was another 36 to 145 million, which is a huge range. I don't recall why it's so large. And then there's a breakdown of each of those categories: local project costs and regionally significant project costs. And it goes through some scenarios on how those are funded. Local project costs funded first entirely by the city, partially funded with tax and the rest bonded. And then the remainder towards regionally significant project costs. And actually, Kenna, I think I have a definition for regionally, or how those two were defined, maybe. Did I include that? Potential.
Yeah, so local project contained within city limits, unlikely to be eligible for funding from CDOT, RTD, DRCOG, and this analysis assumes the city is solely responsible for funding these projects. Regionally significant projects are potential regional, state, and federal funding partners available.
Okay.
And the rationale behind that is just that, as I understand it, it's really hard to get funding for something that truly is just a Littleton only project. Like the only reason people really want to give us funding is because like, hey, like you're a state highway or you're a throughway that helps the rest of the county. Or
Schools can be.
So, yeah, it's a little nuanced, right? So if we're talking, let's take TIP, so the Transportation Improvement Program, which DRCOG does. It's federal funding that is dispersed through the states, which is given to MPOs, which is what DRCOG is, and then dispersed throughout the Denver region. And there's two different calls for projects with TIP typically. There's the regional and then sub-regional. And so regional, and this is, a time when maybe Shane should have been here, so I'll do my best, but because he's the one that sits on the Arapahoe County forums and whatnot. So the regional, Arapahoe County will submit a couple applications, and those are really geared towards the regional impacts. It's not just a Littleton-based project. It's, it may be on Santa Fe, but because it's impacting the whole region, right?
Like the Mineral Spur Trail, is that an example of that? We got DRCOG or something because they deemed it part of the trail system or something, so it had an.
It does not have TIP funding.
Oh, okay.
Well, I can get into more detail with that. And then there's the sub-regional forum, which is where you submit projects to the sub-regional forum, which is counties. And then within the counties, you rank projects. So the regional forum, it typically, Arapahoe County will decide, we're going to submit these projects. And then it goes up to the DRCOG board. And Emily, you may, I don't know how much you know about this. Okay.
All right.
And then they decide projects. The sub-regional forum, it's more of an internal discussion within the county of what projects are we going to rank and what are we going to submit with our allocated funding. So those can get a little more to that local level, right? Because it's all about, prioritizing stuff across the county. In order for projects to be TIP eligible though, typically they have to be on the regionally significant roadway network, which are larger roadways and, between volume, connectivity, all those types of things. And so, and I can even pull it up. So typically the roadways in Littleton that are on our regionally significant network are what you would think are our major arterials: Mineral, Broadway, Santa Fe, Bellevue, Bowles. We just submitted to add Littleton Boulevard though, because it stops at Santa Fe. And so we were trying to justify including Main and Alamo and the Littleton Boulevard is that is a whole corridor that connects into Bowles that goes to Jefferson County. So that is why we've been really successful in getting TIP funding for our arterials and, the high injury network that we have in our TMP, which is on arterials, because those are eligible roadways. Whereas places like Elodie, Windermere are not eligible for that funding. Now, that is just one bucket of funding, right? There's lots of other buckets. HSIP, which is how we're funding Broadway and Mineral and Broadway and Littleton Boulevard. That you have to, with that grant application, I don't know if it's really, and I'd have to look into the details because every grant is different. I don't know if it's so much as it has to be on like a regionally significant roadway, but you have to show a safety need and there's certain thresholds that you have to meet. And so typically that's only going to be on these larger roadways. There's lots of other programs. There's Safe Routes to School programs. Like that's where that school specific stuff would come in. And they're looking specifically, how are you improving people accessing schools? And there's an infrastructure side to that. And there's also a programmatic side, right? Because Safe Routes to School is both. It's both building better infrastructure and doing programming like bike and walk to school day or other types of things to encourage students to walk and bike to school. I mean, there's a lot of different types of grants out there. So for like the Mineral Mobility East project, that was originally a CDOT Safer Main Streets grant, which was, that was a pretty short grant cycle because it was using ARPA funding or pandemic specific funding. And with that, you had to show relation to an economic center or
Like a light rail or something.
yeah. And so, yeah, we qualified because it was all about improving access to light rail.
Yeah.
Which then leads you access to other economic centers, right? And like that program was Safer Main Streets, and then it's turned into Revitalizing Main Streets, and we got a Revitalizing Main Street grant to help mill and overlay and then stripe out the buffered bike lanes on Church Street. And so that justification is it's in downtown Littleton. This is a, big economic hub for the city, and then we're improving mobility. The Mineral Mobility East project's a little funky because we got the Safer Main Streets funding. It wasn't enough to build it, so we ended up having to get additional funding. So there is Dr. Cox funding in there, and so I think it's technically in the TIP, but it didn't go through the typical TIP process. And then we also have an Arapahoe County Open Space grant. So like ACOS grants, or Arapahoe County Open Space, that's very localized. There's no requirements to that except for you have to give better access to trails or recreation.
So can I try to summarize?
Yeah, sorry, I've just been talking a lot.
So the way I would summarize that is, it's a good rule of thumb, but it's not a perfect rule of thumb. That if you can get funding for it, it's probably regional. If you can't, it's probably a local. It's not perfect every time, but if you're just trying to draw big, broad swaths, those definitions were kind of sort of close.
Yes, there is, and I think maybe a better way to frame it is there is more funding opportunities for regionally significant projects.
There are some for local, but they're far and few between.
They're lesser and there's less money there.
Okay.
Like a school or something.
So that definition is not a perfect definition the way it was defined, but it's close enough. All right, sorry.
Can I ask a question about this line? Was this 733 million, like specific projects that 2019 was planning on doing, or?
733 million.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you go look at the TMP.
yeah, there's a breakdown by cost of every project and I don't know.
Big table?
Yeah,
Okay,
at
yeah.
the end,
Alright,
it's
yeah.
a kind of a ranking, I guess, or.
We didn't get that much funding yet, so.
No, because I mean, like it was like $100 million was in there just for the Mineral Santa Fe, like overpass, I think, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing too. The TMP came out in 2019, our ADA transition plan came out in 2019. So I'm not exactly sure how much those two things overlapped. I know like the sidewalk stuff and some of that things are included in the TMP, but like I don't know if all of the things in our ADA transition plan are captured in the TMP. That's definitely a goal, of the update is everything we've done will roll up to the update, but if things happen before and after. So there's also, all the projects identified in Broadway corridor study are necessarily in here. I mean, there's a line item for Broadway corridor BRT, but I don't know if it's as detailed as what the corridor study came and Mountain said that was published last year. Same with our trail connectivity study. Like there's some overlap, but there's also probably some new projects that are not fully encompassed in this number.
Okay.
I don't remember where I left off. I guess with the regionally significant projects, I guess the take home for the cost analysis is that we're not even close to having enough money after funding all the local projects. Even raising sales tax only funded 2%, bonding another 5%. So it was, the recommendation was obviously pursue partnering or grant funds for those to fill the gap. Next slide. Then there's a financial strategies analysis. I guess I kind of touched on that a little bit. Fund local projects first, and then there were two scenarios with the regionally significant project cost sharing. They looked at both a maximum and a moderate federal participation. So if we get all the grants we applied for, what would that fund? And you can see it's like 50% transit, 80% active auto. At a lesser federal grant participation, 40 and 50. And then it goes into funding sources, and I didn't go into details there, but it's just like a whole, menu of various grant and program opportunities at federal, state, and local levels.
Acronym city.
Acronym city, and that'll be a part of the update for sure, reviewing what's out there, what the opportunities are. So I didn't do a deep dive into those. So that's kind of like the high level Cliff Notes version of what's in there now. Any other discussion about kind of what we're starting with? Okay.
Very thorough.
Yeah. Okay, on the last slide, you'll see, like I mentioned, maybe things that are maybe missing or opportunities. And I just want to acknowledge the city's probably doing a lot of these things. It's just not formalized in the plan. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of improve the implementation section by going into some of these that you see there. Project phasing, so breaking up large projects into small projects, making them more, I guess, easier to afford. Bundling, help me with that one, Derek.
It's the opposite of that.
So one of the great things, and this is like even regionally significant projects, or we could have a project that both us and Centennial enjoy and say we want to do it at the same time. So thus we only have to pay like mobilization costs. We have to pay it, equipment costs once instead of paying it multiple iterations to come back out. Or the other thing is like, say, the utility department wants to go replace an old lead water line, which I don't think we have, and if we did, we're actively replacing them. But then we can come in and that same project and the same patching scheme, we're able to get other projects and share the costs across the board, which can give us efficiencies 10, 15, 20%. And just make some projects that were just too difficult to be possible.
I can't remember if we use it in the TMP, but the way we've talked about that, and I know Public Works talked about it, at least under Keith, and I think you guys still talk about it, is the idea of like leveraging and opportunistic, right? Is that still the terminology you guys are using around those types of things? So is that kind of the same thing?
Like very similar, and just maybe expanding that a little more to outside of Littleton and working to those like regional park. Because the more we work together with our neighbors, the more we all get done together too.
It would be like the underpass on Broadway that we're doing now.
Exactly.
These.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted, right? So it's exactly what you were saying, like, how can we combine efforts of, we know we need to go replace this drainage pipe. What transportation improvements can we do at the same time if we're already ripping up the road, right? So yeah, we definitely work in our water, utilities, payment management, all that kind of stuff as well. And we think for construction impact, like we only want to rip up a road once, right? And you don't want to, like, we just had a conversation, which I think we figured out, these protected bike lanes that we're planning to put in. And say, well, Water Resources realized, oh, there's some corrugated metal type that we're in place. And so it's like, what's your timeline of that? Because we're not gonna go and pay a contractor to put down, expensive striping and install these things if we're just gonna have to then pay someone to take it off, repave, restripe, right? And so it's like, we have to make sure we get our timing right with those. And then the opportunistic thing, especially when it comes to grants, right? If we can leverage 20% of our money and get 80% through a grant, like that is, we're able to do projects that we would not be able to afford otherwise. So while the TMP gives us a really great roadmap for what projects we want to do, it doesn't limit us, and we can only follow projects in the TMP or only what is prioritized first, right? And especially how we prioritize projects in the current TMP, which is something that we're thinking internally of how we can update that for it to better serve us is, there was a whole prioritization method. And so.
What page is that on, do you know?
I'm looking at 168. And I can share that here. Sure.
Sorry, guys, it's not on 6:30.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to send out a reminder.
No one else needed one. You got the majority.
By happenstance, I noticed it.
Sorry, I apologize.
No,
I was already here. If I wasn't already here, I might have missed it as well for something else, so.
Well, thank you for that, Grace. Appreciate it.
I looked this morning.
I was on the phone with Shane most of the day.
So yeah, like this is how we've currently prioritized projects. So if you look at the top ones, Santa Fe and Mineral and Santa Fe and Bowles. Reconfigure into an interchange, like the realistic, we're not doing that. Right?
Is it the goal and objective alignment score, which was the prioritization method? It looks like that. It looks like that's sorted by that.
Yes, yeah, it's sorted by that. I know there's a whole lot on how we got there and weighted and all that stuff. And the criteria. So the criteria was built off of the goals and the modes, and then you do a bunch of math and whatever, and it comes up with a score. So I forget what we were talking about.
Project bundling.
Oh, project bundling. Yes, thank you. So yeah, all that to say is like, this is a great way in our current TMP of how we prioritize stuff, but it's not as how we're going to go and do projects, right? And so I think this update, we want to look at how can we revise this to maybe figure out, what is our plan for the next 3, 5, 10 years and what is realistic. And, the term financially constrained, like if you're an MPO, like what Dr. Kaga is, and you get federal funding, there's very specific federal requirements of what you have to do, and you have to create a transportation master plan, and it has to be fiscally constrained. We as cities we have no requirement. You don't even have to have a transportation master plan, right? It's just good practice to have it. Right, exactly. So, while we don't necessarily have to create one that is fiscally constrained, it's still best practice to know what is realistic. Like, what can we accomplish with our estimated budgets, and what are we planning on getting grants for?
And I guess in that subject, what we would probably want to see something in line, and of course, everybody else jump in as you feel necessary. It's like, we have the primary ranking, but we would like to have maybe a couple more statements. Okay, there's this project going on. We can get 3 of these smaller critical projects done for a significant cost, and then something say on the 2030 TMP update, or whenever that happens again, we could even track which programs were effective in bringing that funding.
Totally, absolutely, yeah.
And if the more formalized that is, that also gives us accountability, which is a big thing if we want to. I just like these projects of the goals of what the citizens want to see done, and we can say, okay, this is, you know, the TMP came in, we updated it, we put these new items in, and now here is how it helped us make these decisions and how it's effective for the citizens.
And we've published one TMP report on progress, and we are working on one again this year that'll be published probably later in 2025 as well. And so our plan is, yeah, moving forward to build that into the TMP update too, of what does that report on progress look like, and build that into our scope as well. So that we are, you know, reporting out how we're using the TMP and what are the results and successes and challenges that we're facing. And we're also planning to do something similar with the Safer Streets program as well.
I did notice something on the bottom of page 166. If you go to the 166 couple pages up, it says bridging just above this as well. So if you go like halfway up, you can see right here, it says, for example, on the bottom line of the top page, in general, projects that improve auto capacity or operation safety are given the highest weight based on the prevalence of auto travel in Littleton.
Well, if you look at keep going up, if you go down, it says the possible points for auto travel is 250, which is
Very heavily weighted, yeah.
a lot.
Yes. Kids stand no chance.
I was gonna say, yeah, let's write that down as
Yes.
a suggestion from the board of let's do our criteria.
Yeah, I
We're
would
going
say
to anyways, but you know, I think that's one of the things we're wanting to hear from you all.
I think any form of transportation should at least get, you know, I could talk a lot.
Well, you know, it's, and we've talked about this before of where politics stood at the time of this TMP and the conversations that we were having with city council and the public, and it's very
Culturally perfectly, yeah.
very different from where we are now. You know, the council support for active transportation and safety and all those things. So it's a little funny to read that, because I almost feel like in this update we could almost flip that on it, kind of like auto having the least amount of weight to it, and say that as an F for the public record. We don't know what the criteria would be at this point, but I can see it totally shifting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we would think of it differently potentially, yeah.
Just a quick thing on that, I'd also like to maybe see bike and pedestrians separated.
Yeah. I'll have it grouped in one.
Correct, because as like some of the popular topics of today, like the trail projects and stuff like that, some of that might be more focused on one or the other. And there's even some like projects where, you know, we could have car and bike as a category, like, you know, if we get rid of pedestrian crossways and a few things, but would be that would be evaluating stuff too.
So for funding, that final slide,
Yes, let me go back.
do we want to chat about, you know, does the board have any recommendations of like what's missing in more detail, I would say?
I'm sorry, can I clarify? I want to go there. Can I clarify one more of your points?
Yep.
If we talked about it already, smack me. Revenue trends, what exactly you mean by that?
I think
Like higher sales.
financial trends is maybe better, and revenue falls under that, but like interest rates,
More economic activity, increasing sales revenue, yeah.
What else would fall under that, huh?
Growth,
Yeah.
I guess I'm
for a recession.
resulting in more people living here.
What is that, but what does that mean inside of a TMP? Like, what would the TMP?
So we're discussing that, like, and I'll just give like a national example is gas taxes were meant to pay for highways. But that may not be the most effective way now of paying for those types of projects, and we want to make sure that the sources of funding that we're looking at are effective to the day and age that we're in.
Got it. Relevant.
Yeah, I would add cost of materials to that. I know that's been a challenge for a lot of projects. You have a price that you think is good, and then you go to bid and you find out it's twice as much.
My house lumber package went up 40K when I was building, yeah. Happens.
Does a city our size have any ability to hedging in that way? Like between the.
I think that was the idea of taking out debt, was to hedge against inflation and other cost rising.
The most repeated justification for taking out debt is that it's cheaper to build things now, even if you account for the interest than it is to wait. So that's
I actually admire like really like big projects, they will go hedge the price of steel. Like you can actually like use futures contracts. You can, so if price of steel goes up like double, even though you still pay double, you actually often your futures contracts make the difference. So you're essentially paying what you originally paid.
That's good.
I just don't know if a city our size has that ability or not.
I don't think it's within our current financial team's capacity.
So now that you said financial trends, getting to your questions and development, is there anything else we want to add? Like in my mind, and maybe this falls under it, I don't know if this is appropriate for a TMP. I would really love experts to come in and say, here are what the other revenue streams that you're not considering, that or you should consider. You know, like, and one of the things we talked about is like, oh yeah, like the sidewalk fee that converts to, right? Like being able to say, these are the types of things that other municipalities use to fund types of projects you guys need. And you should be thinking about bringing those to city council and asking them to be passed or whatever needs to be done.
I think we can like provide advice, but when it gets to something like that, I think that's probably gonna be more appropriate at council's level, because that's now directly engaging like dollars and stuff that needs to come to public input.
So I apologize, I missed it. You guys already talked about this, but one of the things I'm thinking a lot about is kind of development trends. You know, in the time since the last TMP, you know, downtown Littleton has become much more of an arts and entertainment district. And we, I think, are going to be doing, we're doing the Littleton Boulevard plan. And I think part of that is expanding some of the economic kind of trends west of where it is now. And I think one of the things that I think we have to think about, and this may sound stupid, is how we navigate. We're really struggling with parking right now. And so realize parking is tail end of transportation, but I wonder if you guys would, and maybe you've already talked about that, just make sure we also include kind of where is the city going?
Was that one of our topics, parking? We have that somewhere in.
I don't think we did. I don't remember it being one of them.
Parking.
It was on the
Parking
list.
has a lot to do with funding, because if you have paid parking.
Yeah, no, I think you need to think about.
Well, and we do involve it a little bit. Because that's gonna talk about street parking, that's gonna talk about a little bit of the planning aspects of that too.
Yeah.
And does it fall back to the bundling aspect, and can we work with RTD and get them to do some things with their lawn?
So I spent the day with Shane, 2 hours with Shane on the kind of Arapahoe County transportation forum conversation, and the RTD conversations were focused a lot on bus transit down Broadway.
Oh, yes.
Priority. Then there's the obvious Front Range Rail that will have a station at Mineral Station right now is the current plan. But there's also a surprise. Everyone was surprised. New pile of funding for possibly expanding the light rail into Douglas County.
That'd be really good.
So
On the Southwest Rail.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So those are the things that we're talking about meeting today. And then you guys heard the presentation before about the transit on demand stuff that's going on in Douglas County. And that's clearly something that's very popular, so we talked about. A lot of houses going out really far east. Houses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just in Parker. Now it's like, oh, that whole area between Park Meadows and like Parker now is filling in like crazy right now.
Go out Ridge Road something.
And I think, like, we've kind of touched on the cost sharing item in the project bundling. It's very much in that same spirit of finding ways to efficiently spend dollars. In the pilot projects, we want to kind of get put in writing the city's efforts, because it really is a good way to cheaply test something before we really invest in it.
You spoke to one time, Derek, about a previous city that you worked with that earmarked a certain percentage of the general fund or the tax revenue.
Morgan's 1% for streets sales tax program, where they formalized a 1% sales tax to go straight into the street maintenance budget. And they have used that very well to meet the needs of the city's maintenance dollars.
Yeah. So I wonder if there's maybe a bullet here of like earmarking dollars specifically for some of these things from the city's fund.
Well, and I hear you, and I think I can see how like that makes it easier to get the population to vote for a certain thing, right? Like, hey, you want better streets, and that's where it's going. The downside of that is that things like that can last a long time. And so, you know,
Past intention.
100 years from now, there's still a 1% city tax, even though everyone's taking
Well, like
Tabor.
Yeah.
Flights everywhere. Right? So, like, you get these things that
It's true.
will outlive their necessity, and cities are still bound to do that.
I mean, 3A is targeted towards capital improvement. My reading of it is we're putting about a third of it into management.
But we have the flexibility to move it wherever we want.
Right, it's not earmarked for specific projects, it's earmarked for,
We're always gonna have capital.
general capital.
Probably a good way to leave it.
We're getting a lot of pressure now to create a dedicated fund for art. The arts entertainment, or the Arts and Culture Board is pushing us to do a percentage of capital towards art. So it's not, that kind of conversation is going on. I don't know what I was trying to say.
And I guess kind of, would that be something that in your opinion would be relevant to the TMP, or do you think that would be more of a bigger city question that would be escalating past this board?
Both. I think it would be good to include something like that in the TMP. I mean, especially when we're looking at the reality of what our like goals and vision is, and then what you have to spend to build that vision, where they don't, you know, connect. And I think that's a real conversation that we're starting to have, you know, especially with city council looking at debt and whatnot, of if we're really gonna build out like a very well-connected, safe, comfortable multimodal system, what is that gonna take and what is that gonna cost? Thinking specifically to like our February council meeting, when we presented on safer streets and we were talking about corridor studies, that came up with like, hey, we're just trying to get money to do the planning, but we have no money to do implementation. Just to build ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps on a Lottie is gonna cost over 7 million. Like, we don't have that scheduled anywhere. That's just one of 10 other, of 11 corridors that we're wanting to look at. And so, yeah, how are we going to accomplish this vision? So I think it is something that should be included in the TMP, but it's obviously a conversation that has to escalate beyond the TMP and to city council to figure out what does that funding structure look like.
And that actually touches on at least one more topic I would like to see is efficiency spending. So like when we get into the maintenance, when we get into the asset management programs, that we're putting together a 30-year street, not a 20-year street, that we're making sure that the materials and everything that we're going is gonna help ensure that, but we're not just choosing what is ineffective, but very efficiently spending that money, even though some of that might be a little bit more upfront cost. We can reduce a lot of the life cycle costs, which once that type of stuff is put into the system, can greatly save the city maintenance dollars, which can be put into upgrades and such.
So we're pricing things out, thinking from a life cycle as opposed to initial.
Lowest bid.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, it's the whole thing of the cheapest item may not be the best item.
No, I agree. I mean, it's because there's a lot of stuff that goes into, I mean, I there's one town I went to at one point a long time ago. I remember you could see in this town, like the way it would work, they built a playground. And like everybody said, oh, we should build a playground. It'd be great. You know, what does that cost? Oh, $1 million. Oh, it'd be great. We'll get it. And you can see that like literally they just forgot about it then. Like they put zero money towards maintenance and then you could see they built like a new like retention wall. They're like, oh, we'll build a retention wall. It'd be great. And then no one maintained it. And everything is just falling apart. And you could see like every 10 years, they probably get really excited about some project and then never thought about the long term. And so like, I agree, like there's this aspect of we can't just build something. We have to think about like, what is the total life cycle cost of building this and maintaining it?
Once it's been built, it becomes a liability. You know, it's kind of a.
Well, maybe you can answer this. Are we, as the city, confined by having to take the lowest bid? Like some
I don't believe so.
government entities are, where they have to take the?
I mean, council that is totally based on city ordinance, and the council can rewrite that ordinance if we chose to, but I don't believe that's what our current.
I would hope not.
I believe some grants
Sure.
might stipulate
Lowest cost.
lowest cost.
We appeal to those with a life cycle lowest cost and maybe not an upfront lowest cost.
It's a really interesting question. I don't know. Worth asking, right? I believe there was an instant recently on a project going to construction that the lowest bid,
I believe you, yeah.
had some issues, so we had to go to the next one and anyways. They were no longer the lowest bid.
A good example is a manhole might cost $10,000, but a change order manhole costs you 25.
We made a bid one time at one of my jobs, a decade and a half ago, and we were the lowest bid because we were uninformed about what was required. Project, and I think that's not uncommon,
Yeah, well, and I believe in this instant, there was they were the lowest bid because they had a mistake.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah. And so then when someone caught the mistake and they were no longer the lowest bid.
Yeah. There has to be some wisdom in there.
Yeah, well, good reminder of QA/QC process for all this.
And I guess something else, because we're looking at debt funding because it's more efficient to spend money now. And because the future savings are gonna be like different than a cost like that, maybe we could incorporate some of that strategy into those programs, into how we evaluate those costs, like spending $1 now might also give us benefit through some of the debt funding methodology.
I think we're looking at debt funding because of inflation, and we're also looking at it because at least some of the council members believe that it's okay to have, if you're buying an asset that's gonna last for 20 years, people using it in 20 years can help pay for it.
One aspect that I was thinking about yesterday is when I built my house, I didn't have to expand the sidewalk. And in a lot of municipalities, if you build something or you have a meaningfully large project, they require you to bring it up to the current, goal, in essence. Cause I live in the part of Littleton with like 2-foot sidewalks, where one person walks on and one person walks on the road. And I think it would have made sense to require me, to expand my sidewalk when we were building our house.
Yes, that is a really good question. I want you to ask at next week's meeting.
Next, is that the 4th Thursday? Is that our normal team?
Our normal team
Yeah.
meeting. And so we're going to have Aaron come and then Jess Denley, who leads our development services group in community development that does all of development review on the engineering side. And so she can answer that question more eloquently than I can right now. That's a really good point though, of I don't think we have anything in our TMP specifically around residential. And we have it in other places, right? Especially for commercial. You know, we can require people to do that. You know, we require them to build out sidewalk. Without getting into details, you know, there's an issue with like the quick trip that just went in. Yeah, the sidewalk didn't meet our standards and they're gonna have to redo it. Yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I don't believe there's anything in there about residential.
Well, that just kind of goes on the whole subject of impact features.
Yeah.
Impact, construction, if that makes sense. And we can actually make that a subject we want to be included.
And we do have multimodal impact fees currently.
We just don't have the smaller system, smaller project impacts, which we also have to be very careful about though, because sometimes you tell a single family home, they gotta put an extra 25,000 and they may not build here anymore.
Or we'll get Robert not reelected because his neighborhood has no sidewalks.
The list of things that are gonna get me not reelected, that was actually pretty low, but I appreciate your thoughtfulness.
Well, and we've also been reaching out to the business chamber and economic development to come to a meeting later this summer. Which I think is, you know, kind of spot on, Derek, of what you're saying of, you know, what's that balance of, we obviously want to get the mobility and safety impacts. That is part of our vision for what the city should be. And so how are you requiring developers to do those things? But then, you know, it can also go so far to the other end that, yeah, you're not encouraging development or people think Littleton's too expensive or there's too many fees or whatever. And so there's a balance there.
I know we have cost sharing projects and cost sharing programs. Could maybe those be expanded to address some of the small project impacts?
Yeah. I don't see why not.
I want, is the chair and the meeting mover, I want to point out, we're now 50 minutes into this. This is the first topic. What do we want to do? Like, what do we need to do from here? We've talked about a lot of things. We've addressed this now. I'm gonna look at you because you're the staff member we're working with. What is the deliverable you would like from us on this topic today?
That's a really good question.
I'm gonna say that last slide.
Yeah.
The deliverable itself.
Yeah, and you know, and I think if you all feel like there's more that you want to flesh out on here, you have the opportunity to do that and send it back to us. Or if you think this is it, this is good, we take this as our deliverable too. So I'll kind of leave it up to you
So
all.
that works for you. Like you can work with that.
This feels like it's not really clear what we're asking.
Yeah, that's why I'm
This
just
is like
trying to make sure
bullet points with general words, you know, of like cost sharing, you know, but like what about, what is the actual recommendation there? You know, is my.
So a lot of it is just including that as a subject and a specifically addressed topic that previously wasn't in the TNP. Because like the funding was kind of rigid, like the subjects that were talked about. And I want to expand that conversation, but we also kind of want to see what is the consultant going to come up with in response to that, and maybe they'll have some perspectives and ideas that not even we saw.
Yeah. Should we write that explicitly?
I will refer that question to Kenna. Would that help to write something like that?
Yeah, I think you know, as I'm hearing this discussion, I'm thinking that maybe having a little more of this fleshed out and being very explicit, just because, you know, not everyone who's working on the TMP is in this room right now and hearing this conversation. So, yeah, you know, and I think that is, Jeff, you brought up a good point. We haven't really talked about like what the deliverables from these meetings are going to be. And I think we're very open to whatever you all feel like is feasible or what you want to do, but I'm wondering if it's even just like,
because that's the second you said it. So here, I'm gonna push back and say, I would like you to tell us what you want.
Okay,
And if we don't want to do it, we'll tell you.
perfect.
It's too
I love
much.
that. That's great.
You should just set a rubric of like, this is what we'd really like to have and let us push back. Don't
Okay.
leave it
Yeah,
on-
you all are experts and we are not.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking that for each topic, TMB prepares a one pager of your findings and your recommendations to staff.
I like that. I think that's reasonable.
Findings and recommendations.
And most of the findings are based on review of the last TMP.
Yeah. And research of other TMP.
Like, for
or other
instance,
things we've done.
Josh and I are working on the street classification. We could say, we found other cities who have already done something like
Yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not just backwards facing, it can also be forward. Like, let's incorporate this because we found other resources that we didn't have, you know, for what a great street classification system is.
Yeah, I think it's whatever research you all feel is necessary for your topic. So I think definitely looking at the existing TMP should be, you know, part of that. Looking at other cities or other TMPs or other plans or whatever it is, other experiences, whatever you find is needed for your individual topic.
So make sure, so the recommendation, first of all, I think they did a great job of the findings, the first couple of slides, right? Maybe flesh it out a little bit more, but given that this is where we are now, this is the recommendations. What would you want that recommendations to look like? Like pick this as a case study, like they take that and write it out in words and have bullet points? Is it just that with maybe a sentence after each one? Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be super formal. Like, I don't think we need to be writing, you know, complete sentences and paragraphs. To me, it seems like taking this as a good template, but yeah, adding a little more detail. So, you know, there's a sentence after, what do you mean by project phasing? And what are you looking for? What do you mean by project bundling? And what are you looking for?
Yeah, like, I would also say this header is backwards facing of sorts as well, of like what's missing. You know, so I think this should be like 2025 TMP revision recommendations, you know, have it be very explicit, you know, and say, this is, so we have the findings up above, and then the 2025 TMP update recommendations down below, you know, and maybe that's the one pager, half and half.
And so you're picturing you would take our 5 pages.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do with this?
So we have meetings set up. I think we have 3 right now, and we'll probably continue them, that we are starting to talk about the TMP RFP scope of work and update on what we're looking for it. So I think we will take these and bring those to those conversations as we're developing the scope and say, hey, look at what the TMP has recommended. How are we going to incorporate this?
We'll get to see what the final, like, what was kept and what was left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could also see that one pagers being used by the consultant as they develop the plan. When I respond to RFPs for a living, I can see some of the stuff being very relevant to the RFP, but also some of the stuff being relevant to the work of the contractor.
Absolutely. And I don't know if we've like explicitly expressed this, but you know, as we've been going through our Safer Streets strategic plan, we sent the consultant all of the work that you all did last year on Safer Streets and the presentation you put together. Like we handed that to them and said, please let this influence your work and what we're doing. So we are using your feedback. We may not always tell you that, but we are.
Yeah, there's like a few sources, like general surveys that were sent out and what people
Yeah.
responded with. The TMB said this, you know,
Mhm.
so I think that is.
Right. Yeah. You're not the only stakeholder, but you are a stakeholder in this process, right?
Okay, so next steps here. Are you two able to take what we talked about, what you put together, what we talked about? And build a one pager? Do you need more from us? Do you want us to do
Yeah, we can do that. No, I don't think we need anything else. Just, can you, maybe send that to us?
Yes, absolutely.
The marked up version?
My thought on this is that like maybe the final meeting that we have before we turn it in, we have each person present and then we just like go through the recommendations and be like, we aligned on the recommendations, you know, and it's kind of fast moving, but
I
yeah.
agree. And
Yeah,
I think it's also a great opportunity because like just in this one, we came up with these things of saying, oh, maybe we should also suggest that they don't weight autos as high and maybe we should do this and that.
yeah.
We see it all in one meeting, it gives us the ability to go, oh, actually, that should go into that guy's and that should go into that one. And let's make sure we missed a sixth one. Let's write one real quick. So we
Yeah.
don't overlap up.
How are we gonna remember to bring up the weights? I don't know which section, which one that's in. Okay, yeah. It's yours? Okay, yeah.
Belongs in ours in some way.
All right, yeah.
All right, so that is the funding. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Good work.
Yeah, no, great work. So, ours is gonna look a lot more pathetic compared to that.
Oh, well. Throw me under the bus.
So the next one is what we talked about of shifting culture. I will say that within our current TMP, there are certainly a few things that, and we didn't put anything close together. Actually, I'll take a step back and explain why what you're seeing, what you see. David and I were talking about this. We had all sorts of like little, like very detailed ideas and we were really struggling with like how in the weeds should we be versus how high level we should be. All I had in my head is Shane kept saying a vision statement. So I kind of went vision statement level. And so we kind of, after having a lot of conversation, we came up with a lot of conversation.
And it was hard not to just go tangential because.
Yeah. So we could have had 20 slides like you guys had of like a bunch of details and we chose not to. Yeah.
Because it was, what's the job of the consultant?
Yeah. I felt like to your analogy, we were telling them which nails to use. And they're like, that's not our job. Like it's their job to figure out what nail to use. So let me give a little background on what we saw as this culture shift. And if we're on the same page, it's a good time to speak up. There's not a lot in the current TMP about the ideas of shifting culture. Few references to behavior based upon some engineering standards. But for the most part, there's nothing that really addresses this. And I think, in our safer streets, we talked about this idea. I think I felt like we've all been in agreement, the idea that is the biggest lift of all of the suggestions we made, but also is the one that has the highest potential impact. When we all have our own individual ideas, I think, of what the culture is now and what it should be. But I think there's several things we can all agree on. We tried to capture them there, but basically what it comes down to is the culture shift means that the population of people who use our streets and our paths and our sidewalks all prioritize things like safety, prioritize respect for other users of the road, whether those other users be drivers, whether they be pedestrians, whether they be transit users. And so that would be that from a high level and act accordingly, right? Of how do we act accordingly if safety is a high issue? I mean, the reality is that oftentimes if you're a driver, that means slowing down. If that means if you're a pedestrian, that means probably being a little more aware of your surroundings, right? So there's lots of things that go towards that. And then the other big thing is just that candidly, we don't have that now. And so it's not just about engineering standards, and which are a part of it. It's not just about behavior, but it really gets to that higher level of thinking about the way we travel through the city differently. And so what we are looking for, what we think we're looking for, and again, I've never written a TMP, so I'm not sure if this is, how much of this is valid for in a TMP, but we've all talked about the idea that we're not experts in this area. Like none of us are really behavior and culture change experts. We're hoping that somebody at a consultant might be, and that they could help us with more of the strategies and policies and ideas that we can implement as a city to move towards that vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in other words, we've got to convince people that they shouldn't smoke anymore.
Yes.
Back in the 50s, everybody smoked.
Yeah.
Somehow we shifted that.
Yes, like seatbelts, and you can go online and go to YouTube and type like reactions to seatbelt laws.
Yeah.
Like, you've taken, or drunk driving was the funniest one. A guy was like, when I get out of the mine, you can't tell me that I can't crack a cold one on my drive home while I'm driving. And, it was just complete culturally different,
So yes, we have to change the culture. I don't know how to do it, so I'm looking for how much can somebody bring to the TMP, put down in writing, here are ways to do that as a city, so that 10 years from now, things look different.
So I think maybe as an example of this, to make something a bit tangible, Josh and I were chatting about this yesterday when we were working on ours, and I think there's a lot of overlap between ours and this one. My recollection from what Aaron has said in the past is that kind of the main document for the city for transportation is like levels of service, and that idea of like, how many cars can we get through this street at X times is one of the largest guiding principles for the engineering docs of like how things have to be structured. But we were thinking of like in the street classifications, we have local residential streets. Like Josh's street, I don't know if you all know where Josh lives, but like, if Runyon is right here, the roundabout is right north of Runyon. Josh lives on that street to the right. And that kind of goes, that is the epitome of a local street, and mine, I live on Easter Ave directly across from Runyon. That is like the main thoroughfare to get in and out of the community. But like Josh's street is not, we're not trying to move as many cars as quickly as possible through that street. We're actually, we probably want to do the opposite on local streets and say, no. Like you drive slowly, you are a guest on this street to get into your garage. And then there's kids playing in your street, for some of these local streets, And so I think that is a cultural shift. Like this vision statement is about like making sure that like there's an aspect of this where it has to be like, how does Littleton move its cars through the city, by virtue of, and what I mean by that is like, there is all the cities around us will also have an expectation that they can get through Littleton going wherever they need to go to, like Dr. Cog, CDOT, all of these. So there's a shared responsibility to get cars through, but also how do we culturally say sometimes the objective is not to get the car through as quickly as possible. When we drive up Broadway and we get in, and get to Littleton, Englewood's, city center in essence, the speed limit is all of a sudden 25, whereas by Starbucks on Broadway in Fremont, it's 40, or 35 there. So there's this idea of, speed versus also slowing down based on different needs.
Yeah, and this is a question for Kenna.
Mhm.
Because we have the chapters in the TMP, which are what build up to the recommendations and everything. And I know that usually we would have some placeholder chapters for when stuff wants to be kind of like put in without having to cause a renumber of everything. But this almost seems like something that would need its own chapter so it could establish criteria that could be incorporated into the future guidance of the other chapters. Because right now we have stuff like the trends, we have transit, but everything with respect to the planners is actually very technical.
Mhm.
And if we have a way to capture the cultural, but also to give it value in those design decisions, that might be a way to model that in the TMP. Then we could put stuff like we were just talking about the classifications on what gets a capital project. Now we could point to, say it's like the cultural chapter, even the safer streets chapter, because that seems like a very chief thing of that. And that would also formalize and adopt a large part of the Littleton Safer Streets program as an actual guidance policy.
Yeah, like that thing that I pointed out about the prioritization of the weights, that to me is that should be a very large section, not a footnote, in essence, and on a tiny little page, like this is how we prioritize when there's finite space on the road, when there's, competing needs. This is how the city of Littleton prioritizes travel. And then that could very easily lead into the engineering doc, as well.
But also to the funding aspect too, because a lot of the shift that we're trying to accomplish isn't nuts and bolts. It's attitudes, and so it's social media and meet and greets and all the rest of that stuff too, and the transparency that we're trying to achieve. And so we've got to have the money to support all those functions. And does that go into the TMP?
Well, I was wondering if the TMP would have a list of partners, and a list of possible tools.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, the partners in Cultural Shift would be. things
Oh,
like
I see.
yes,
Yeah.
Or, I mean, not, or RTD or any of those.
That makes sense.
And then the tools could be education, they could be.
Events or whatever. they
Yeah,
could be.
and obviously I don't know what they all are, but I was just wondering if that's something you wanna.
I love that. That's, yeah.
But should it be a part of the main body of the TMP, or should it be like an appendix where we list it out?
So I would make the argument that so we're having safety as a focus area within the TMP, right? And so within that allows us to create an entire action plan around it. And so we've got our strategic plan, which is more of an internal document, but this external action plan, we have still these focus areas that we've identified, which are people first streets, culture change, collaboration resources, and data-driven decision-making. And to me, I saw us, like, the appendix to the TMP is this safety action plan, which within that, there is a entire chapter dedicated to this culture change that would then, yes, list out the partners and the different opportunities, and then actually have the actions that we have identified for the foreseeable future, like for that. The time frame of TMP is again
50 years.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not going to have like it nailed down to the very specific activity per year, but sort of this. Here is what a typical year of engagement and culture change type programming looks like within this work, and how it could be replicated and expanded. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I don't know if it makes sense to have a culture change section within the TMP, and more so it's within the the safety action plan. But I would love to hear reasons why it should be within the TMP, I guess.
I think it's a great question, because one of the things I wrestled with as we were doing this is I was thinking about the idea of you and Shane saying, like, we pull the TMP down every day and like look at it and reference it. And I'm trying to think in my head, like, when would you pull the TMP down to reference whatever section we're going to build here around culture change?
Right.
Like, what would be an example of that?
Well, the thing if the safety is something that's beyond just engineering, or just the transportation, if it's part of the responsibility of the city, then you would hope that people other than Kenna and her colleagues would be pulling it down, but it would be a tool for other parts of the city.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if we as staff on the transportation team would be referencing like that chapter wherever it lives, right? Every day, but I think it's something we can point back to, whether it's in grant applications or working with our partners. Sharing what our program is about.
But then, I mean, Emily, you've been successful at creating new partnerships and new types of projects with that practice bike place. Yeah, so that's a new kind of, it's a new tool, and it's a new partner. And so, sorry, I just totally, so that would be an opportunity where you would pull it down and look at the TMP while you do that work.
And I think something we should keep in mind, especially as the city of Littleton, is like, we do have a lot of good examples of TMPs nationally and everything. But this is more of an art and somewhat of a science. And there is still room for novel solutions for us to say, maybe doing this way and showing the world this is how you have the most successful TMP. And they look at Littleton and say, man, that is a really good way of doing it.
Honestly, yeah, I mean, I like the idea that it's not so specific to just safety, right? Like, it's this culture change on a wider level. Obviously, safety is sort of the most paramount shift of culture that we're looking for, but there's also mode shift and just other types of culture change that we're looking for within our transportation system. You know, whether it's increasing density and like there's I think a more holistic way of looking at it, and definitely would continue that status quo of Littleton sort of thinking outside the box in innovative ways.
I'll just give a quick example that we chat about, like, you know, those little boards with the big black tire that go about 60 miles an hour up and down everything. Nobody has any guidance for that. Nobody has any idea how to handle it. None of our infrastructure is there. It uses it and it provides its own consequences, but there's not really anything to address it.
It is part of the new updated traffic code.
Excellent, good.
Yeah, they've created a new category for, and I don't remember the detail, but there, you definitely see an effort to create a new category for those new types of transportation.
Yeah, like motorized micromobility.
Something like that. And so it, but there is some evolution there. I'm not saying it's adequate or.
Yeah.
But it'd be good to make sure that, like, I don't know, kind of, we were been involved at all in that conversation, because once something gets classified, you know, as a certain type of vehicle, it designates where it should be on the roadway or not on the roadway.
It's hugely
Which
impactful.
then, you know, so what it sounds like, because I know we had a serious injury crash a couple months ago of a person on a one wheel, and that sort of, I think, kind of kicked off probably this discussion. And from what I remember is that they told us that these now are no longer allowed on the roadway, only on, you know, I guess the sidewalk, or I couldn't remember, but that then makes me a little
60
concerned, because then you're like, well, I don't want them on the road because they don't have good visibility and all of this, but at the same time, we don't want them on our, going 60 miles per hour on our trails and bike lanes and sidewalks either. So where do they fit? And that's where I think making sure we're a part of that conversation, because we then have the ability, again, to think innovative. Like, I think we should be thinking about wider bike lanes, because we have more and more e-bikes and other modes. And so we want to make passing lanes within our bike lanes, and, you know, maybe calling them mobility lanes. So giving ourselves like that flexibility to.
I like mobility lane, yeah.
I mean, so what I'm talking about is, and I'm gonna describe this in a poor way, but essentially we get the state's updated traffic code, and
Gotcha.
we adopt it. And we do have I think we could change it, but there's a goal of kind of having relatively uniform traffic code across jurisdictions. And so that's the process that I'm referring to. And I just remember there was a new section in it around these things. I don't remember what.
I would say that those classifications are a matter of life and death, you know? And so I would hope it wouldn't just be like some, this is gonna sound overly dismissive, but like some bureaucrats, you know, at the state level, just pushing it down without being informed, you know? Yeah.
All I'm saying is that I see movement of the code kind of describing new modes of transportation that wasn't in it whenever it was updated last, which I think was 5 or 10 years ago. I'm definitely not arguing that it was adequate or even appropriate.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I up on the screen is our key performance indicators identified for the culture change goal as part of our Safer Streets strategic plan. This is more of, you know, kind of to get you to think of how we're internally thinking about culture change and what metrics are we going to be looking at on an annual basis. Are we achieving this goal or not? So like Emily mentioned, you know, safety is kind of, I feel like, at the heart of all of what we're doing with Safer Streets, and, you know, hopefully with the TMP update. But it goes beyond that, especially with like the mode shift and how we're getting people to take other modes besides driving. How many people are we reaching with engagement? And then, you know, we do have shifts in high risk behavior. So we are going to be looking at the crash data, right, as that very like quantitative safety related data as well.
I could see culture being in the TMP as like a section at the beginning, you know, saying this guided us. Like, for instance, like biking and walking to school, the percentage of students, like we could say as part of that, like we are having a shift here where we want Littleton to slow down, like we want it to be a place where kids have the freedom of mobility, because there's spaces on the road for them without having to have their parents drive them, to the store, to the movies or their friend's house or their job because the streets are safe. I feel like that could be explicitly stated too.
Yeah. I agree. I gotta be honest, like, I the second or third time you said like slow down and slowing down is important. But I feel like we can create a system, and my vision is we can create a system where it doesn't necessarily mean everybody has to slow down in order
I agree.
to work.
Yeah.
Right?
I think in certain
more like
places they
freedom of
do.
mobility. It's being able to get where you want to go, how you want to do it in a way that's safe.
I think in some places, things will speed up, if we do this well, so, it's.
At least the flow through.
When I say slow down, I'm talking about, I'm thinking, that was in the context of schools and getting kids around, so
Well,
like.
it's the kind of, I'll give you what you mean is it's where different types of travel are coming together.
Yeah.
Slower, right? You want speeds to be more aligned with the people around you. So
Human-centric.
Highway where everybody's doing 65 miles an hour, doing 65 is fine.
Human-centric design, instead of just focusing.
Where people are walking 2 miles an hour, you shouldn't be going significantly more than 2 miles an hour.
Someone said a really good point one time where they said, we want people to slow down and stop in some areas of our city, like Main Street, as an example. Like we want people to slow down and spend time there. And you can't really make gathering places that are human-centric and try to have speed. Like they're in some spaces, those are wrong, like, I don't know the word, but like you can't have both. Yeah.
So think of it this way, instead of like the word slow down, instead of all this, we're doing a complete street design that is putting the appropriate allowances for each type of traffic to seamlessly integrate or the function of the street, which gives us the flexibility of being faster, slower, medium. Because just like we're talking about micromobility, you may have a e-bike lane that people want to go 35 miles an hour on, and you might have a pedal bike lane that people want to go, say, 25 miles an hour.
That's really fast for
But
oh yeah, I seriously.
it's like, and if we put and assign all that as design features that have to be considered in the engineering, because right now it's like the engineering will take into account mostly car traffic, a little bit of bike and stuff, but there's not really speed values assigned. There's not impact values assigned to those other than, just making sure we have space for them. But if we can formalize that a little bit more, then that will be something that impacts the actual designs when the technical individual says, okay, this is how I choose the car speed, the bike speed, the people speed. Now, granted, if people are going faster than 10 miles an hour, I think we have a different problem.
I think you're working on the street classifications. In my mind, that's in that one.
I agree, yeah.
And that's, and just to throw out like a request for you when you get around to it. In our TNP right now, we have a map. I don't know if it's a great map, but we have a map of pedestrian prioritized streets and, a network. And we have a map of a cyclist prioritized network. What we don't have is anything that says what a pedestrian prioritized street actually looks like.
Yeah, so
Like, what does that mean?
we're gonna put in there that there's a recommended street mix. Do you know street mix? Maybe you just pull it up really quick and show them.
Cross section.
Mix.
Yes, exactly.
Like a cross section, like
Cross section, yeah, but.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Like where you can build it out,
Yes.
and show it, and
So it
so.
should be a very clear definition. People should know, like be able to see, oh, yes, this, I can see why this is a pedestrian prioritized street.
Yeah.
Pedestrians have the priority.
Yeah,
Bicyclists don't, motorists don't.
yeah, and there's
They're
trade-offs.
on there, but they're not, they're they're like way down low.
Yeah,
And we need that.
So something, I don't know, can I share? The Dr. Cog Complete Streets Toolkit, I recommend you checking out. It's a really fantastic tool that I think might be really useful to what your street typology research and work you're doing, because yeah, it digs into the different, obviously Cog, so you have like some urban downtown streets all the way to a rural roadway type street, but it has the different type of features that you would find on that type of street, has a cross section and an aerial, as well as like prioritization of the different modes for that street type. So and from single occupancy vehicle, biking, walking, transit, and freight.
There's an example here of like the map and then the different cross sections right there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know all this stuff's out there. It's just, it's not in our TMP.
Right, and but that's what I'm saying is like we
That's helpful, yeah.
use that as not just a guiding principle, but it's good to be in line with regional typologies as well as best we can.
I didn't know that it had it, so that's really helps. Yeah, there's a map coming up pretty soon here, yeah, right here.
Yeah, so then this is like the
That's downtown.
map that's not as good, but yeah, there you go. So it'll give you like the modal priority based on the street, but then
I totally lost my train of thought, so never mind.
So for cultural side
Go
of
back to your KPIs for me. So there's one aspect, first of all, I love the KPIs. There's one aspect in there that we have talked about, and I think we've talked about in general around here. It's not in there. I don't know how we measure it, so it probably shouldn't be in there. If you can't measure it, it shouldn't be a KPI. I'm not exactly sure what to call it, but it's the idea of like education on the rules of the road. Like education on like
I knew you were gonna say that,
Because,
but
like, I will say, like, when we talked about this, like, how many times have you been walking down Mary Carter Greenway Trail or Lee Gulch Trail and a cyclist just goes whizzing by you? There was no bell ring, there was no like, on your left, there was nothing.
It should be part of getting your driver's license and just a whole bunch of schools and yeah.
It's similar with pedestrians. I mean, I was telling Dave, like, a couple weeks ago, I went for a run, it was like 7 a.m. I'm going on Lee Gulch Trail, I crossed Prince where we have a great pilot project right there, by the way.
Heck
We also have the
yes.
flashers, and I ran over, and there was, the car was coming down the street, he was coming a little fast, but I thought I had time, and I just ran, I didn't hit the flasher, I just ran in, and he was like, and I thought he was mad at me because I didn't wave to him. I'm like, yeah, thank you for stopping. And he drove up and he goes, you can't just cross. You gotta press the light. I'm like,
The damn button, it drives me crazy.
no, I'm actually,
you have,
it drives you crazy when they don't press the button?
Yeah.
but you have no legal, like, or you have.
I'm a pedestrian, the light is there, it's just more of like a, hey, like,
Push the button.
well, I'm sorry, but that's actually not the rule.
It's exact,
But that's
that's the
why,
exact need for education.
that's right. Right, and the education is push the button.
We brought the demons out of him.
That any marked or unmarked crosswalk.
Duly noted, and
Push the
the
button.
reality is we need, like, people don't know the rules, like some of
So-
our city council members.
What-
And so-
If I could,
So I mean, like, we need education, like, people in our city need to understand the rules of the road, like, how do we work with other people?
so, Kenna actually sent an email earlier today about some stuff in Fort Collins that they do, which reminded me of work that I've already been talking through with Bicycle Colorado around driver education. And so Fort Collins has a great like bus driver operator safety bicycle education course. And that would be something cool to like bring here with our LPS bus drivers around, bicycle friendly driving. But Bicycle Colorado also has a bicycle friendly driver course. They have both in-person courses that they can offer, as well as what's called the Shift driving course. It's an online free course that you can just register to take. And I've been talking to them about ways that we can start promoting that and getting like a toolkit together of ways we could get more people. And like, if there's a way to track specifically who is taking it from Littleton. So that's one, like, at least avenue we have of
No, I mean,
education.
I love that idea. I love it, anything is better than nothing, right? I guess my issue is I feel like it's even more base level than that. I mean, it's like what, not just like how do we operate safely as drivers around cyclists? It's what are the basic rules? Like literally, what are the rules?
I have 3 kids going
I
through
mean, we
driver's.
literally had a
ed
disagreement
now.
right here.
They're
Like,
not,
right here. We had a disagreement on what the actual rule is.
Yeah, or even what the practice should be.
I just had one kid get a license a month ago, and one kid get a permit a month ago. And so we're right in the thick of this, and like, you just don't learn it, through driver's ed and things like that. Like, there's so many parts of it that you just simply do not learn.
The Fort Collins thing had a great idea too, is they reached out to the rec centers and used South Suburban, and then would go in and get master teachers, cyclists, or whatever category. And then they would teach and particularly focus on the seniors and teaching them what the rules are.
We need a traffic garden.
Well, that's exactly what a practice park is.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
So
we
we
have-
also are building a, now permanent resource at East Community Center, which will be a miniature street network of all of the different types of bike facilities that we have on our roads or will have. So a road with a Shiro, a road with bike lane, a buffered bike lane, all the way to a protected bike lane and traffic circle. And it's a space for people of all ages, kids definitely encouraged, but it's a place anybody can come with their bike and come learn how to ride or practice riding. And we'll have signs there teaching, how to use these correctly, as well as, again, Bicycle Colorado. We're gonna have on August 9th, we'll be doing a learn to ride class there. Unfortunately, the classes that they offer are really small. So it's only 8 students for that first class, but hopefully they find that resource a great location and we can have a partnership with them to offer more regular classes at that location, that we would partially subsidize some of them so that we could offer them for free to the community. Also working with LPS, I spoke with them today around, they have a bike trailer that they send to the that elementary schools can request. And typically it sounds like Field and Runyon are the only 2 schools that have frequently requested it, but I spoke with them and have basically the desire to keep those bikes at East Community Center in a shed or some sort of storage facility, so that then the schools, all of the elementary schools, could do field trips throughout the school year to East and do programming there.
That'd be a great field trip, yeah. Really good.
So based on what we just talked about, that topic, how do we incorporate that into our, either this deliverable or the TMP safety action plan in general? Like, what do we call that?
What I was just talking about, like all the education stuff, or?
Yeah, because it goes beyond just, we have it here, like, where was it? It was just there. We talk about safety education up there, but it goes beyond just safety education. It's about.
I would say this is all culture change. It's what it's a combination
That
of.
aspect of it, the education on rules of the road, education on how we work around other modes of traffic. Like getting the education level of our citizens.
Yeah, like safe transportation education, or something. That's trying to make it more encompassing than just driver's ed, or-
It would be more like that.
Yeah, mobility education would be really good. Yeah.
As a TNB thing and as a thing we give to the consultant, how do we package that in a way to give it to the consultant to work it? Would you say that's
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Thank
we
you. Yes.
want to have something like, whether it's a chapter, whether it's an appendix, whether it's something, we want something tangible in the TNP that can be used to lead to other resources, like whether it's enforcement, whether it's engineering designs, whether it's possibly new codes and ordinances down the road, something that is formalized and documented. What do you guys need from us to make that happen
And to best enable you to do your jobs really well.
I know, well, as we've been talking, I have a couple thoughts. One thought is, I do think we're capturing culture change as part of Safer Streets, right? And so, and as we've talked before, like what is Safer Streets, what is TMP, how do they work together? And how are they separate? And so, yeah, how do you take what we've really defined, I think, pretty well in the Safer Street strategic plan and transfer that to the TMP? Yeah, is this, I'm sorry, I'm asking more questions. I don't have answers. So like, yeah, is this an overarching thing that is throughout the document, or is it a specific chapter, right? I could see it being either or both, or
Doesn't it have to be a guiding principle in terms of that safety and getting that change?
right. Yeah, and kind of how we've structured it in the strategic plan is that, obviously Safer Streets Littleton is focused on safety. And so what are the tools of how we're going to accomplish that, right? And so culture change is one of those things.
We have right now like missions and goals as part of the TMP. Then we have strategic framework. We have what are the city's missions and goals, and then it goes through each goal. So that seems like it could be somewhere in there, that we chat about this more broadly, like the culture side of things.
It's a goal.
Yeah.
It's clearly a goal.
Yeah, like shift culture. Yeah. Just like drunk driving and wearing a seatbelt and yeah.
And maybe like
Improve flow.
That's true, yeah.
to the staff is a document that kind of lays out an either or, like, we have this one overarching topic and we have these like 2 or 3 ideas about how it could be. Now, we don't know which is the best method, but we want to have the consultant kind of look at this range of ideas and see.
Recommend a way to.
Yes.
Well, and I'm wondering too, if there's, I don't want to phrase this. I don't know if more tangible way is the right way to phrase it, but like as going through the existing TMP, you all brought up the criteria. To me, that's and maybe I'm totally off base and you can tell me that. But to me, that's also like, how are we internally shifting our culture of how we're evaluating things? And so like the existing criteria is focused, prioritizes vehicles, and we want to change that. So I'm wondering if that's also an exercise that this board can do of looking at, how are we shifting our mindset of going into this new update? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I understand what you're asking. I'm not sure how it fits into our August 1st deadline or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's totally fair, Jeff.
Well, think of it like in the either or. So like if we go to the piecemeal approach, we want to say then take, the things that were only vehicle specified and expand them to multiple modes and to give them like all a measurable tangibility to say, okay, these are now valuable and now have to be thought about. And then maybe we also get into some of the things like communication, we get into education, and have the consultant put something tangible. Because like an education topic might come up as a project in the capital improvement project list. Like maybe we have a education campaign with the schools to help fund teachers or something like that. To say we want to do more driver's education.
To me, I think like under culture change, I see collaboration and resources as the things that you sort of identify that you need. You were asking like, what do we need to get this work done? And to be honest, like we are not solely going to change the culture when it comes to safety on our own. The city of Littleton isn't going to do it. And so it takes buy-in from all of the stakeholders that are a part of this work, and not just buy-in, but a shared belief and buy-in of that culture and making sure that our values align. And so in some ways, I don't want to be so formal with it, but with some of our neighboring agencies, we are working on IGAs. And I feel like something to that level with some of our partners like LPS, I know that's kind of crazy to put out there, but some sort of thing that actually sets out clearly what does this partnership mean and how are you a part of this and buying into it and helping us push this overall, like, push these efforts forward towards this goal.
A way that can also get into our funding thing, because like with the cost sharing, with the collaborations. We allow that if somebody has an input to, say, a city-specific project financially, we can also allow a range of input into like some of what's actually being built in more like, not so, because there's always gonna be that, but like something more public. To where, you know, say the principal of Littleton Public Schools wants to have like a school street classification that has certain controls, and they wanna kind of help move that along faster than would be the typical timeline, but they say they wanna have like some inputs, whether like some of these things have like art projects involved, whether they have, you know, certain traffic features that say like Fort Collins is that, you know, Littleton may not be thinking about or incorporating into their own thing, but to encourage those individuals to come in, it could almost be like an incentive too.
I agree, sorry. I think that's a great one.
But, you know, when you're out there searching and whatnot, and I did safety, and it took me to all of these corporate things about, you know, how do you instill the safety culture in your business, right? And it was a top down, bottom up. You had to get from every level, they had to buy in. And so, you know, that's where it starts. And then it's at each one of these segments that we're talking about, be it LPS or the Amazon drivers or whoever, and then they've got to buy in.
Yeah, I mean, so the bicycle Colorado driver training I was talking about, I was really just thinking about, I wanted to set up an in-person course or two for the city of, like all City of Littleton staff. Some offering that maybe next month during Bike to Work month. You know, but you're right. It's like, sure, we could offer these to the greater public, but we need to start from within first, and like making sure we are living those values and are bought into the culture change beliefs that we are preaching.
So we can preach to the choir.
Right. Yeah, so it's like, I think taking a look at our policies and our procedures that we have in regards to all that type of work. I mean, I know a lot of cities that have cameras or some sorts of technology, you know, within their city vehicles, in regards to like safe driving. There's that kind of stuff we could look into. I mean, I've talked about getting e-bikes for the city staff so that we can have people getting around on different types of, you know, getting around the city different ways, so.
Yeah, we chatted recently about how the vehicles that they buy now are 70 grand. That's a lot of e-bikes for 70 grand per truck.
Especially since the city's not that big.
Yes, yes. It's hard to carry pilot projects on a bike, but yeah.
There's an appropriate measure for that going, say Littleton City Hall to like Bemis Library. You just need to go back and forth. A commuter would be a more logical thing than taking a fleet truck.
Yeah, I agree too.
So there's something I'm wrestling with, and I don't know if it's worth fighting for or even pushing for, but like we keep coming back to safety, and not safety is not important. But I feel like this culture thing is more than just safety to me, right? And the word I use, it's not a diplomatic word, so we shifted it around, but like the first word that came to my mind when I was talking to David is like there's a lot of people who use our roads who feel very entitled. Like it's like, I am entitled. If I am in a car and I am driving, I am entitled to drive and go fast, and everybody else needs to watch out. You know, if a pedestrian walks in front of me, I'm taking him out because like I'm bigger. And so he needs to know that I'm the big guy on the road.
I would say it's,
Bicyclists operate the same way. And I would even say even pedestrians operate the same way in certain.
to me, it's like the Moses mentality. You expect the sea to part in front of you, you know, and for you to be the person who gets
Yes,
to.
I am entitled. I have the entitlement. I have the priority always.
Yes.
And every mode of travel does it. Cyclists do it, pedestrians do it. And it's like, we need to get out of that. Like, we're not just entitled, like that's not safety, although it will contribute to it.
It's community.
It's an individualistic
Yeah.
type of culture and yeah, it's trying to create a community and
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, and that's something, you know, and I admittedly forget exactly what our current TMP says. But like Jeff, you had brought up our bicycle and pedestrian priority streets. And that's one thing, you know, I think we've talked a lot about this, of like our current TMP got us a certain way. And I think this next TMP, we're going the extra step, right? So it's like, yes, we have pedestrian, bicycle, freight, transit priority routes. We haven't really like looked at how those lay on top of each other. So, you know, when you have a bicycle and pedestrian priority route, that's the same street.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, like Windermere, you know, is
Right.
bicycle
I think
priority.
you were kind of getting that with the cross sections of like, what does that mean? And it, you know, and I think Dr. Cog and CDOT, they have a lot of graphics showing, you know, like typically the pedestrian is the most vulnerable user. And so like that is where the highest amount of safety is going to go. And then, you know, it's bicycles and then it's buses and then it's cars, whatever the triangle or whatever graphic that I'm picturing in my head. You know, what does that mean though, when they're on these streets?
I think if someone said, what's the one thing that you want to get out of this TMP update? It's exactly that to me. Like, how do we prioritize, you know, space on our streets to get people where they need to go safely? And, you know, and when there's trade-offs, how do we handle those trade-offs? Like I'm looking at the goals right now on 32 of the TMP. They're connected, healthy, inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable.
Those are our city goals.
Yeah, I don't know how the previous TMP was creating that, you know, like with it being like, the auto is preeminent, you know, and we're fully like, how is that creating sustainability, you know, or inclusivity? You know, it said allocate services and facilities so that people have transportation options that are best suited for their needs and lifestyle. And then it's like, but we're a car city, so everyone drives in a car. You know, it's
Getting back to
paradox.
Ken's
Yes.
point about how much ADA compliance on a lot is gonna cost. And really, our most vulnerable need the greatest amount of help, because those people got a real problem trying to get around.
Well, Josh Stewart brought this up at a bike ride event for Liam once, where he said, there's 11,000 students in LPS. And if that was an employer, we would bend over backwards to make it so they get to where they need to go very, very well. You know, but we have this one group of, you know, this one demographic of 11,000 students getting around, and they're kind of the last considered, you know, in some ways.
So I'll ask my question again, because I didn't hear an answer.
Let me repeat.
How do we
myself.
make sure that when we talk about culture, we don't get too, and the consultant in particular, doesn't get caught too much down the safety path? Because not to say safety is not important.
Yeah.
To make it understand that there's other dimensions and it's a little broader than just safety.
So what are the other dimensions?
Well, I think Robert, you gave a great example of this one time when we were talking about Vision Zero. And we were saying, is zero's the goal, like certainly the goal, but also you said what percentage of people feel safe on our streets, you know, as an example of this. Like, are we getting more people onto the streets because they feel safer on the streets, and how would they rate their comfort on the street? So that's an example of, that's not just safety, and it's certainly related to safety very heavily, but it's not innately safety.
And it's also how we'll get cars off the street, because if they feel safe and comfortable riding or walking.
Yeah.
So
I mean, our basic theory of action, right, as I hear, is people are not biking and walking because they either feel unsafe or the infrastructure is not there.
Yeah.
And that's our,
Well, and I would love to have this be part of the TMP because from my perspective, like, it's a math problem fundamentally of like, we have finite streets in a built out city and we can't just continually expand roads. So if the regional area gets more and more people, like a car has to have a certain amount of space in front of it, a certain amount of space behind it, you know, and it's just, they won't all fit. So if we really want to have a transportation system that works for 20, 30 years, 50 years in the future, like a TMP does, we have to have people choosing a multitude of options, you know, that have higher efficiency, higher safety. So it's not like, that's not safety. To me, that's also like practicality and economic viability even of like, can people get to where they need to go quickly? Like, for instance, I see a lot of people waiting to go to work at the King Soopers right on Littleton Boulevard and Broadway. And I've rode that zero line bus. It took me 82 minutes. Like if you go on maps, 82 minutes to get to Dave's Hot Chicken, like on Broadway in Denver, like South Denver, you know, like that, you can't get to a job. Like if you don't have a car and you're like cleaning houses up there, you can't get to your job on time if the buses go that slow, you know, it's.
That's the elephant in the room, isn't it? RTD.
Yeah.
We're doing.
But also like, you know, my son is like, hey, I need to get up to, he just got a job at Pirates Cove and I need to get up there. And I'm like, okay, which road is the safest for you to get to your job, you know, for on a bike so that I don't have to drive you everywhere, you know? Yeah.
It was Windermere, but.
Yeah.
So could I summarize that as quality of life possibly?
I like that. I think
Quality of transportation.
I think a lot of us view that as quality of life. Yeah.
But is that that's the, just to be clear, like, that's the culture shift we're trying to.
It's one of the,
aspect.
it's like safety, quality of life. So if we had, this is probably, and can you pull up page 32 of the TMP? I think this is probably the goals, you know? So it's kind of what we're talking about here. Like the goals are the culture to some extent, you know?
Which page?
32.
But I gotta tell you, based on my experience living through education wars, you tell people you want to change their mind, the government wants to change your mind.
Oh, yeah. It's like you want a communist city where we can't leave our 15-minute, you know?
And that was, I mean, 25 years ago, when I entered education, the conversation was, you know, about, you know, well, we're having the conversation right now around DEI. That's a conversation around changing people's mind. And, you know, in my mind, it's teaching people respect, but so just be careful about how much you want to put in there.
I agree.
The government wants you to change your mind.
Well, and I think the big thing, yeah, if we're going to accomplish our vision, right, for what our transportation system in the city is yeah, we want to make it so that you can have transportation options, right? We're not taking away your ability to drive. Yeah. We're giving you options so that you don't only have one option to drive, right? Yeah. You have the option to walk and bike or take transit.
And we're not even like, I would say, I'm not trying to change your mind.
Right.
I'm just trying to say, can everyone have a spot on this street to exist safely and get to where they need to go for their jobs or their quality of life or recreation, for whatever the case may be? Can we all have a space to travel safely? You know, it's kind of, and that has to be within the context of the street as well, which is why we have the street classifications, you know?
Well, and you know, I think even beyond that, as we're looking at these corridor studies, you know, as we're starting on this Lottie corridor study, is even with our classifications, like every single roadway in Littleton is different block by block. Like we did a whole assessment walking audit of a Lottie, and every single block is different of, oh, yep, here's a striped bike lane. Oh, now it turns into a shared parking / bike lane, which, you know, the party lane, as we like to call it. You know, oh yeah, we have a 5-foot sidewalk. Oh, now it's back to the 2'8" Hollywood curb, and we're back at a 5-foot sidewalk, and oh, there's a fence here, and you know, so it's like everything. While the TMP is visionary and wants to set certain standards, it's like at that engineering, once it gets into that like design level, everything is so context sensitive. So we can put parameters around it, but until you get into the nitty gritty specifics, you know, there's going to be trade-offs. And I think starting the Lottie this year is going to help us, I think, with these conversations with the TNP. So we're gonna start having these real world conversations of like, what do we want the street to look like? What is the community? What are the people living on the street? What are the trade-offs people are, again, the community and the people on the street willing to make in terms of parking and all of that? And so hopefully some of those conversations can help inform how we're writing this TMP as well.
And I hope the TMP has enough teeth where it leads to a reasonable conclusion when we're evaluating those things. Like, we're saying that safety and sustainability, you know, and inclusivity are our goals. And yet we're also saying that we can't remove any parking spaces on a Lottie to get to the kids to school safely going down a Lottie. Like that it just doesn't, those are contradictory, you know, statements.
We support that. We've talked about this at other times, and it may be something we frame like what we want to have the expectations, but some of these do have to lead to enforcement, whether it's code, whether it's the police giving out a ticket, or like some people will only listen to consequences, unfortunately. Yeah. And there's gonna be a lot of people that are there, but we also need to make sure that there isn't a consequence if everybody is following the rules, but I'll have that assurance that, you know, whether they see an example. The Littleton Police Department posted policemen at some of the schools. Caught a lot of people that were just kind of doing a little too much, and it was regular people. But the minute that they saw enforcement, they pulled back their behavior and said, "Oh, that makes sense." But it wasn't until that happened.
We have 9 minutes left. 6 minutes, yeah.
So, yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. We technically have a little more, like we're not on just get like have to be hard, but I would like to get that here very soon. So on that, I'll look to Dave, because like, do you feel like you have enough? We have enough to enter now?
Yeah, sure. I leave Tuesday.
So we need to get together soon. All right, just find some, before we leave, let's save more time. Well, we don't have to have it done by next meeting.
Who's presenting the next one?
So the way we set these up is these special meetings are to discuss this.
Yeah.
And then our regular meetings are just our regular meetings. So we're not gonna discuss this other than tangentially.
What is the next, for these special meetings, do you know who are the next two?
Don't off the top of my head. Is that handy? So we don't need to have it ready for this one.
Then
It
we're
might
good.
not hurt for us if you have some time before Tuesday to get together, just while it's still fresh and try to do it. For the next one, we're bringing that up. What I would say is for the next two, actually, now that we have this idea, at least this of a one pager.
Try to have that
ask that
format.
the next groups bring the one pager to this, actually, you know, units of it. And then we can use that to start beating things up.
I agree, yeah.
Unless I missed something, I believe the next extra meeting is July 9th. And we're talking street types and roadway classification.
There's another one in
There's
June.
one in
There's one in
June,
June.
trying to find.
We have the connectivity, basically.
Yeah, okay. So the next one is June 19th. And we're talking connectivity and then communications and public.
Connectivity is Derek and Josh. Communications is Jeff and Michael.
It is, okay.
Congratulations.
You have to go first and second.
All of these.
All right.
I do want to make one council member report before you're done.
Hold on one second, and I promise I'll come back to you. So on this topic here, so on the culture shift, anybody else need to put anything in, going once?
I would just say like, how do we fit it in? Like, is it goals? Is it?
That, I have that down, that's gonna be one of these we're gonna, talk about. And actually, I feel like that's something that we should just put on the consultant personally. Like, that's just one thing we give them, say, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like,
figure it
how do we make this work? Exactly.
Yeah.
And the one thing I wanted to add, I think what you had said recently, Matt, about the teeth of it is something I would like this group to think about it. And staff is gonna think about that too, is what is the teeth?
Could you all, I don't know if it's too little time, but could you all like maybe in the next meeting on Thursday, a week from now, talk to us about what that could make that most helpful? Like, for instance, my understanding is that it all goes down to an engineering doc eventually, you know, or
Yeah.
if a new developer comes in and they're like, hey, do we have to put in, you know, anything on the curb?
So
Like,
you are in luck because that is partly what Jess is gonna talk about next week.
perfect, okay, yeah.
And what documents have teeth, right? Because it's a little
Yes.
confusing. So what can the TMP specify? What does LEDs or engineering design standards
Yeah, that's
specify? What does the ULUC specify? So
That's fantastic.
I think though, yeah, what are things and so what teeth can we put more in to achieve our vision? And where does that fit? Is it in the TMP or does it need to go into LEDs or does it need to be a code?
And then some people put in teeth, try to make things great, and they make it worse because the standards are so high for the teeth that they can't do anything. Yeah, and so we have to balance that as well.
Okay, I'm done, sorry.
That's good. Anything else on this particular topic, the culture shift?
Great job.
Any other questions on the next special meeting we're gonna have in June as far as what we need to do and who needs to do what where? We need to find time to talk, but, all right.
So I think when we did our interviews for new members of our ABCs a year ago, we included part of the interviews, and this year too, in our interviews with people who are applying to continue on any of the boards and commissions. People talked about wanting to have more of a connection with the council. And so the council, in a good or bad way, I think, has continued to talk about it. We talked about that at our last, I don't know, it was our study session or our last meeting. But one of the things they're thinking about is asking for each of the advisory boards to have a work plan and to sort of kind of create an ability for us to talk more about how do we coordinate what goes on between the council and the advisory boards, and then between advisory boards. And so you're going to get asked to do a work plan. That's where it came from. That isn't an F, or you all are going to, but that's where it's coming from. And by a work plan, we're talking about a one-page document. But it's an effort to respond to this, trying to be more coordinated and more engaged.
That's great.
So just wanted to let you know that, and I don't know when it's coming. It's just a heads up when we're talking about it.
And
We have an ongoing work plan.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to impact this group as much as other ones. And part of our conversation is what does it mean to do that for the license commission that only meets once a year and it's on demand. But just, that was just a heads up. That's all I.
And thanks for attending because council members have not attended always. And so you've been very consistent. Thank
And
you.
you plan to be at the one next week too?
Yes, my intention is to be at the one next week, but I'm pretty confident there's gonna be one or two during the summer I'm not gonna be able to make. There's a travel plans. So, and I told Shane, I did not engage in the schedule setting because it was for your meetings. And then I told him, and I'll tell you, then my intent is just to come to as many as I can.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
And I'll come on time.
Yes.
And that's totally on me. I realized
No,
it's
it's
not part of our group.
No,
So
it-
you didn't get my reminder email, so
But that's fine. I had the invitation and it's not on you. You're good.
So I'm gonna make just a quick, I'm gonna say this again next week when everyone here is here hopefully, but just so you guys know, we had a meeting with David from Communications right before this meeting. And we're trying to build out some communication plans overall. Very specifically and very urgently for the meet and greets, because we're gonna be doing 3 of those over the course of the summer. He is committed to helping us put together, make sure we have our messaging, kind of figure out what our messaging is, that the people who are attending know what that is, have a little bit of training in advance. Probably some very minimal collateral materials that we can use when talking to the public about what we're up to and what our priorities are.
So we'll have a table or something at this?
That's what we're gonna have, well, that's what we talked about doing.
we're working on it.
We're not guaranteed to have a table, but that's our plan. So that's it, but also, bigger picture, longer term, we're gonna work with the communications team to build out a bigger communication plan for the board. And what that, he told us our job, and to just think a little bit is what are our broader goals, timelines as a board. So not just this TNP update, not just safer streets, but like what is our broader, we need to be thinking more aspirational where we're trying to go. So we will be bringing that up soon.
Have some chocolate before you go.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
One last thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Emails.
Can we talk about that now?
We can at the beginning.
Okay. All right.
So.
So sorry, Matt, one last thing. Sorry, I apologize. So I just want to remind everyone, we had this conversation literally, 3 weeks ago when we started the board up again, or we had a restart. Private emails versus city emails. So one of the things that I have pushed for and I still think we should do is when we're trying to schedule things to include all of our personal emails as BCCs.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Because keep in mind that anything that is sent regarding this board can theoretically be subject to a core request, right? So the BCC is just I don't always check my city email. I more often check my personal, and so oh yeah, there it is. If you reply to that though from your personal email
You've created a meeting.
you have now, well, not necessarily, not if you, because you're only replying to Shane and Kenna, but you are now creating your personal email is now part of some potential topic that somebody could issue a Quora request on.
Yeah.
So now your personal email address is in that Quora request. They can send you a personal email because they'll not know what it is. If you somehow the conversation accidentally starts going even deeper than that, now they can actually ask what else is in your personal email related to that topic in conversation. I want to see all those emails. And so just be very careful when you get a personal, so we will continue the policy of hey, we're trying to reschedule a meeting, sending it to your personal email so you know it's there.
Yeah.
But be very careful. Do not reply to that.
Yeah, just don't
Not even
reply.
I will be there. Just say got it, and then go log into your Littleton email account and send everything else from there.
If I could add to that, because a council person actually wrote me an email saying, I send these blast emails to everybody. And because it's just hard to send them to everybody individually. And the council person said that if you respond and copy everybody else on the email, you've actually created a meeting because you're providing your information. So if anybody wants to respond to me, you should do so individually and not copy everybody else.
Yeah.
Is that
Reply
right?
all.
Yes, that's true. And that's the guidance that I've received as well, is not to reply all. I do reply all only to city staff, not to my colleagues on the council. Because on the council, we should not have a policy discussion over email. And me putting forward my view on email is beginning a policy conversation.
But it doesn't even have to be about a view.
No, I know.
Simply I did this, and now suddenly it's now part of some bigger topic. As the children in the audience will know, and that can be part of those things, and now that is all out there in the public record, your email address and anything you said. And so it goes beyond just policy.
All right, thank you all.
Have some chocolate.
And everything.
Thank you for staying late at